This is David Griffith, editor of Police Magazine. One of the greatest problems law enforcement officers face as they arrive at a call is that they sometimes don't have all of the information about the situation that the caller communicated to the 911 center. Live 911, technology produced by Higher Ground Incorporated, lets officers hear a live stream of the actual 911 call before they arrive. On this video interview, we are going to speak with Captain Don Redmond of the Chula Vista, California Police Department about his agency's experience with Live 911. Captain Redmond oversees technology for the Chula Vista PD, including the 911 Police Communications Center and the Drone as First Responder program. Captain Redmond, thank you for giving us your time today.
Thank you very much for having me, David.
How did the Chula Vista Police Department get involved in the development of Live 911?
Well, it was interesting at the time. One of our police lieutenants, who later became a captain, at one point went to a futures course, a class where he wrote a paper on this idea of, hey, wouldn't it be great if law enforcement police officers could hear 911 calls immediately in their patrol vehicles? So when he retired, he actually reached out to Higher Ground with this concept of what later became Live 911. And Higher Ground looked around and said, wow, nobody is doing this. And they saw that the huge benefit to first responders. At the time, I was the lieutenant overseeing our police dispatch center. So Higher Ground came to us, the Chula Vista Police Department, and asked if we'd be willing to partner with them in the development of Live 911.
Okay. Well, what led you to start using the software once it was developed?
So right from the beginning, we saw the benefits of live streaming 911 calls directly to officers in the field. When we think about how a 911 call is handled, you call 911 and it's 911. What is your emergency? Help, help, help. What is the problem? And this call taker is trying to enter all of this information into the CAD system, and then it gets routed over to a police dispatcher who then figures out which officers are the closest, and then they dispatch the police officers. So the idea that the officers immediately hear the 911 call and they see the exact location of the caller, immediately we saw the benefits in that it would reduce response times, that it would increase their situational awareness because they're hearing everything that the caller is saying, and in the short term and long term, actually, saving lives potentially.
Does the information your officers receive from Live 911 help them de-escalate situations more effectively?
Absolutely. So when you're thinking about how a police officer is responding to these calls, they're only getting a very small amount of information either from the dispatcher or if they're able to read the computer screen as they're driving to this call. So they're only getting a limited amount. You kind of think of the game of telephone, right? You tell somebody something and then they relay it and then they relay it. And by the time it gets to the last person, that message is a little bit different and maybe not all the information is there. Now, the officer has all of the information in real time. So if the suspect or the subject was armed at the time that the call was made, and as they're rolling to the scene, maybe the person put the weapon away, they have additional information that could be used to de-escalate it. The officers are hearing this in real time for better informed decisions.
Interesting. So, officers have different skills and different experience than dispatchers. So do they hear things on Live 911 that the dispatchers might not notice?
It's interesting. Yeah. I mean, one of the concerns early on was that the officers would hear these, the frantic screams or the excitement of a caller, and that the officers would get, amped up or something of this nature. And really, it's just the opposite. Police officers are very good about controlling their emotions. If they're going to get excited about a 911 call, they're probably not going to be in law enforcement for very long. But it's interesting now they're hearing the 911 call and they hear the tone of voice. They're hearing the urgency or the lack of urgency for that matter. And they're able to put the pieces together and have a better picture of what's happening on scene before they get there.
How do you prevent your officers from being overloaded with information? They've got the laptop, they've got the radio on, and now they've got this live stream. It's got to be too much at times, right?
Yeah, so really the secret to Live 911, one of the secrets is you have a geofence. So the officers are able to set up a geofence around their patrol vehicle, so they're only hearing 911 calls in their immediate vicinity. They're only going to hear the 911 calls that they could potentially be responding to. So in our city, we have 100,000 911 calls a year. I don't want my officers listening to 100,000 911 calls. It would drive them crazy. So what we really encourage them to do is to only listen to the 911 calls in their area of patrol, or around their patrol vehicle, maybe in a quarter-mile bubble around their car. So wherever they're going, if a 911 call comes in, they're hearing it immediately. And what we tell them is, if you're having a problem driving your patrol car, listening to the police radio, looking at your CAD screen, then maybe don't be live streaming the 911 calls. You can just mute it. You can still be logged in. You can see calls come up, and you can unmute it if there's an ongoing 911 call where you want to hear this information, so that the officers are not overloaded. And then maybe when it slows down, then at night or something, you can then unmute it and expand the geofence for more 911 calls to listen to.
What are the officer safety benefits of using Live 911?
It is really amazing. Live 911 has truly been a game changer. And I hate to use that term because we hear it all the time, but now the officers, a perfect example is we had a call of a woman calling in who's saying her adult husband or her adult son was trying to break into her house with a gun and a hammer, and the dispatcher was sending multiple units there, code 3 and everything. And it was interesting when you listen to the call. The officers, they get on scene, they park down the street, and the officers are very calm. They said, we're monitoring Live 911. And what you hear on the 911 call is the dispatcher saying, is he still armed with a gun? And the caller saying, well, I don't know if he has a gun. He's had a gun before, but you guys, every time I call you, you never show up on time. He's already gone. I just wish you guys would hurry up and get here. So the officers are hearing this, and they just made their approach. They walked up. There was no crime had occurred. It was a civil matter, and they just, they talked to both parties, and the person got in the car and drove away. Where you could imagine, had they not heard the 911 call, that could have had a different outcome. We've heard the national message that we need to do different things differently in law enforcement, that we need to give our officers real-time information for better informed decisions. And Live 911 has really done that for us.
Every agency is facing an officer shortage now. It's hard to hire. It's hard to get people to stay, even they're retiring. So how has it made your officers more efficient?
So it's interesting. Our officers are actually showing up on calls for service before the dispatcher even has the call. So we're really impacting our response times, right? Because if you get a 911 call, and a perfect example, the first week we had it, I had an officer call me. He was all excited. He said him and his partner were going to a call of a vandalism, and they heard a 911 call of a business owner who chased out a subject who was trying to rob his business. And the business owner had armed himself with a handgun and was actually holding the suspect who was trying to rob him at gunpoint in his parking lot. The officer said he heard the 911 call, looked to his left, and could see the victim with the handgun holding the suspect at gunpoint in the parking lot, and he immediately made the turn. He knew that the person holding the gun was the, I don't want to say the good guy, but was the one who was calling, who was the victim, and was able to take the person into custody. And our dispatcher didn't even have the call yet because it hadn't been routed to her.
Wow. Well, what improvements have you or your officers suggested after using 911 for? How long have you been using it?
So we've been using it for 2 years. We were the first ones to roll it out. We rolled it out slowly, and our officers gave us information, and we're updating it. So it was different things like when we were testing it indoors, and when the officers rolled it out at night, it was so bright, we're like, oh, we need a dark mode, put it in the dark mode. And when we first started doing this, we live streamed all calls, including non-emergency calls, through the call center into Live 911. What we found was the non-emergency numbers, the people who were calling for information, that was definitely overload. And actually, supervisors would call in to talk to a dispatcher about an issue or something, and then everybody could hear it. So we immediately recognized, now this is just going to be for 911 calls, but other agencies I could see there could be a need for that if they wanted to just stream it for everybody. And really, when we rolled it out, we didn't have it integrated with Rapid SOS, which gives us that GPS location, and where the 911 call in itself was the key to this, listening to it. But now the officers have the exact location of a caller instead of the 100 block or an address. They can see immediately where the person's standing, which has greatly improved our response times.
Awesome. Okay. Do other agencies contact you at the Chula Vista PD to find out more about live 911?
Absolutely, and we're happy to talk to them and show them how it works. It's pretty straightforward. It's one of those softwares where as soon as you get on it, you can kind of play around with it pretty quickly and realize it's very simple to use. And our officers have found that with maybe 45 minutes of just learning all of the different buttons and how to set up a geofence and how to live stream and different things that you want to look at. It's very easy for them to do. And when the agencies look at this, I have yet to hear any police department who's looked at it when they've come to visit us say, wow, that's pretty incredible. Everybody sees the benefit of live streaming 911 calls to their officers.
Do you hear success stories from them?
All the time. I've heard Clovis PD, which was the second agency to do it. We've had documented live saved, where we had a gentleman who was choking. The officer heard the 911 call, actually arrived immediately at the location where the person was choking and was able to render aid. And the person's here today and is talking, and we hadn't even gotten that call routed to the fire department in an ambulance, and the officer was already doing the Heimlich trying to clear this person's throat, and was able to do so and save his life.
That was in Chula Vista?
That was in Chula Vista, and I know some other agencies. I believe Higher Ground has said there were already 5 documented live saved with live 911, which is pretty amazing when you can imagine software saving a person's life.
That's incredible. Well, thank you very much, Captain.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.